Hey, everybody, this is Cynthia Barnes, Women in Sales Influencer, and welcome to the very first inaugural Celebrating Us with Cynthia Barnes. I am on a personal mission to celebrate all that is good with the women that I know on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, throughout the world. And I want to celebrate us. So, without further ado, this is my first guest, Mandy Bynum. How are you?
I'm doing well considering everything.
Yeah.
Can't complain. I mean, my biggest problem right now is turning off the sound on my iPad.
Okay. First world problems.
Yes.
First world problems. So tell me and our viewers what
Uh-huh.
you do and what makes you special, because I think you are just the cat's meow.
Thank you. Likewise. And I can get into my love for you definitely a little bit later.
I'll skip you later.
My name's Mandy Bynum Mc Laughlin. My business is called Mandy Bynum Consulting, and I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategist.
Nice.
So what I do specifically is help businesses start in their diversity, equity, and inclusion journey, because a lot of folks don't actually know where to start.
Okay.
And then, so I get everyone a game plan, and either I get them started with facilitations that are uncomfortable for a lot of folks. I also call it like a CDO in residence function, where I just do everything that they think diversity and inclusion might be and help them prioritize and put things in swim lanes, things like that.
So I have to be honest, and there are diversity, equity, and inclusion is hot right now with the current climate, and everybody thinks that they can do diversity, equity, and inclusion. Please help me set the record straight.
Well, Cynthia, everyone can do diversity, equity, and inclusion. You just can't do it all.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit more about that, because I would think that I am, even though I am an underrepresented population, Black woman, I would be silly to think that I can go into an organization and tell them how to set up a DE&I program.
Yeah. Shoot. Okay. So what I mean by everyone is that everyone can be more self-aware.
Okay.
Everyone can consider the practices that they have in the office, whether they're inclusive, whether they're not inclusive, whether they are being inviting and everyone on their team feels like they belong. And they can also practice diversity by hiring a diverse candidates. So those are the ways in which everyone can help. But I think the most important thing that everyone can do when it comes to this practice is self-awareness and self-reflection and finding your lane. And that leads me into this, I guess, position or practice, depending on where you are in your current company. If you're a consultant, if you come from academia, if you come from tech, it's really important to understand like what you can and should not be doing, and really find focus. I think that's the biggest thing that people struggle with, is that they get into a position where they're a program manager, or they are, all of a sudden find themselves as the chief diversity officer, and they're being asked to do everything. Meanwhile, they have this plan in the back of their mind that they can't focus on. And then there's no real expectation set, and it just seems like it's not working. And so people in this position can be very easily set up for failure if there's not like really clear expectations of what you want to accomplish.
Okay. So when we talk about expectations, talk to me about the KPIs and the relationship between those KPIs, and what should they look like?
It's going to look different for every company. And what might be a KPI in any other part of the business that we think of, for diversity, equity, inclusion, the thing that matters most is impact. So how do you measure people's thoughts and minds and hearts and minds changing around how they orient themselves to racism? How are people more literate when it comes to talking about where racism shows up in their organization and what they're going to do about it, instead of stepping in poop every which way and saying the wrong thing and making people mad? Yeah. So in terms of what you can actually measure that's a little bit more tangible are not things like how many people you're going to hire who are of color. Of course, you probably want to do that in leadership positions, but it's things like activities that you're going to do that people are going to hold you accountable for. For example, you are going to only interview women and people of color, period.
How do they get away with that? Because I can hear people saying, yes, my CEO wants underrepresented populations, but yet when you go to the recruiting team and tell them we want Blacks, Latina, Asians, women, and then those of diverse sexual orientation, the recruiting team will push back and say, but we want the best candidate. Or isn't it illegal to discriminate that way? How do we get around that?
Yeah. A couple ways. One, the way I typically push back on either talent acquisition or hiring managers is like, let's keep it real. You've been discriminating this whole time.
Yes. Yeah.
That's how we got here in the first place.
That's how your organization is stale, male, and pale.
Right. You have so many good ones. So many good ones. I'm going to write that one down.
That's the truth, though. When you have a select group of people and you tell them, hey, we will go and give you $500 for every new recruit or person that you refer to us, like birds of a feather flock together. So you are going to get more of the same.
Yeah.
So yeah, keep going. Keep going.
So it's often a rift between talent acquisition often gets it first because they're in networks all day long. And so they start to see and observe that their networks are not diverse, that their company's networks are not diverse, or that they're only looking on LinkedIn and they're driving themselves insane because they keep trying to find brown people in the ways they've searched previously. So oftentimes when hiring managers say we want a diverse pool, what talent acquisition is actually saying is I've tried, I can't find anybody. Like it's a pipeline problem. So then it sounds like it is actually a pipeline problem, which it isn't.
Nope.
It's just that both sides have not been doing anything differently and are pointing the finger at one another.
Right.
So hiring managers really have to take ownership and broaden their networks.
Yes.
Like, go meet some people that you've never worked for, or hire someone who you disagree with, or hire someone who you think is going to challenge you. And as you start to practice that, what I was saying earlier is everyone can practice equity and inclusion and diversity. As the more you practice building connections with people who are different than you, the bigger your network will be and the bigger your candidate pool will be.
Absolutely. I get calls all the time as the leader of NAWSP, and they say, how do we attract women in sales? And I say, well, you go where they are. Right. If you're looking for Asians in sales, find an affiliate group that has, or an affinity group that has Asians in sales. I mean, I don't understand what the problem is, but I do understand the mindset of if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
What I encourage companies to think about is if it's not perfect, keep working.
Right.
Keep improving.
Yeah. And so it's all the things, it's thinking about all of what I like to do with my clients is really break down their process and help them see what they can control and what they can't control.
Right.
And when we talk about hiring for diversity, recruiters look at resumes for about 10 seconds. Maybe that's generous.
They get a lot.
Right. And if let's say they're looking for a SaaS AE, they want to have SaaS experience. They want to have a year or so. They want to have recognizable companies, but you have someone who's been in real estate. I would gather that they're going to be a great salesperson, but they don't have SaaS experience. And we hold this, we put SaaS and software on this high pedestal when it's really not that complicated.
They look that way.
Yeah. So it's helping hiring managers and talent acquisition see that there are certain things in your job description that you can teach, and there's certain things that you can't. And a few of the things that you can't teach is grit, grit, just perseverance, resistance, ability to implement feedback.
Right.
Like that's not going to come from your garden variety SaaS person who's jumping around to all these different companies every year and a half when they're not hitting quota. So it's really getting to the root of what am I so afraid of? Am I afraid that I, as a sales manager, am not going to be able to train this person because I don't know the product that well?
That could be.
So it's starting with self-reflection, and then it's thinking about, okay, what are the things in this job description that are really, really important? What do my rock stars have? And typically it's not the amount of product knowledge they have.
No, because product knowledge can be taught. And I'm so frustrated with companies that have all these stringent requirements saying we want a diverse population, yet we're going to make the barrier to entry so high and so unrealistic that people won't even apply. Why do I need 5 years of SaaS experience selling to the C level, but yet it's only an entry level position?
Yeah. Right. It's mind-boggling. And I think I'm gonna drop some names here. SV Academy. Do check out their curriculum. They did a partnership with Salesforce. It is this SDR curriculum. And what I love about SV Academy is they put people in cohorts and kind of like teach them how to play the game in a way that will get them into an SDR position, and also helps to coach them in their first year at that company.
Nice.
So they have they get the skills, the competence to go into a role that is probably similar to what they've been doing anyway, but they have the knowledge, the jargon, and like the real, I guess we'll call them technical skills to get into, like, say, an SDR position.
Right. And I would think that there are plenty of positions out there that have transferable skills into technology, cloud, SaaS, etc.
Starting with talent acquisition.
Yeah.
Starting with talent acquisition.
So we've talked about some of the frustrations in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. Can we talk about implicit bias training?
Do you have to?
Well, I hear that from companies, and they say, we're going to make everybody go through implicit bias training. And I say, okay, that's nice. But if I go through training and someone says to me, you're racist based upon the training and the quizzes and the surveys that you've taken, and I don't think that I'm a racist, I'm going to immediately disagree with that and shut everything down. So how effective is that? Or what's a better alternative?
So Lily Zhang is one of my favorite people in this
space.
And we talk about this stuff, and she also posts really great stuff every day. And something we talked about recently and that she posted about was around the entertainment of an implicit bias training.
Okay, talk to me about that.
And how first of all, bear in mind, it's just a checkbox, and it makes it gives you that, okay, we did that. It's kind of like almost, I've had some companies want to create like a form of like sexual harassment training that's mandatory for everyone. Like that. First of all, sexual harassment trainings are about compliance, and we're not trying to get people to comply to being non-racist or anti-racist. We're actually trying to get them to be anti-racist. So when we're talking about implicit bias trainings, first of all, it totally dances around what the issue is, which is racism. And although it can be really interesting and you can be very creative with it, it's not, it doesn't create impact. It gives people a bunch of rules. And so the reason, and so when you do start with you're racist and this is bad, it can be entertaining because you feel bad, you feel guilty, but 5 hours later, you swirl your scotch and take a nap and you're back to the stuff that you were doing before with no more awareness and no wiser. And so when it comes to those types of trainings, I really try to steer companies away, or say, let me know when you've taken that. And tell me what you think, because I am certainly not going to do it, because it's painful for me personally to do those because I feel like a target. I'm standing up and I'm the hired person to tell all of your leaders that they're racist, that they're sexist. Like, I don't want to be in that position, because then I get,
I am not.
Don't you think this? Don't you? Yeah, it's so it's not only setting your company up for failure, it's also like putting undue burden on whomever you're hoping will facilitate that session, when you can just go to Google.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's talk about those who do not work in the profession of diversity, equity, and inclusion. What is it that the layperson can do within their company to promote a more diverse, welcoming culture?
So I'm really glad you asked.
Because
There's
everybody
so
has a
much.
role, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you're an individual contributor, um, let's say individual contributor, maybe entry level, or is your first job, your
Mhm.
first position at said company, um, you can advocate. So when people who have less privilege than you are in the same room as you, and you hear something that's not right, you speak
Mhm.
up.
Yes.
You begin to put yourself on the line where you know that other people can't, or
Okay.
they will be putting themselves at a huge risk if they did. As anyone at the company, including those who are individual contributors, it's really helpful to take an audit or an inventory of the places where racism and sexism shows up in your day.
Mhm.
Not if, but where and
Where?
when. Or like your interactions, and just start thinking about it. Just start observing and raising your awareness around bias and all of the isms that we encounter every day.
Sure.
Um, and then just start to think about them and figure out or think about like how you would switch that behavior out with another that would promote equity, that would advocate for someone who can't. And
Mhm.
it's, slowly changing those small behaviors. Um, and that's what really has the impact. It's again, it's simply showing by example or leading by example.
But some people are unconsciously incompetent. They don't know what they don't know. So, all jokes
So
aside,
true.
seriously, if I say to somebody, hey, that was a microaggression or a micro insult, they're immediately going to say, no, it wasn't. So for someone
Yeah.
to identify their faults when it comes to bias and racism, if we're asking them to do that, they most likely won't even they won't relate. So
Right.
how do you tell them, hey, you know what, Bob, that was really backhanded. You can't say stuff like that.
Hmm. It's not an easy answer because I think there's a spectrum. You have
Mhm.
people over here who would swear up and down they're not racist and they're doing everything right. And they don't actually care about diversity, like straight
No,
up don't care.
no.
And for those folks, like I can only help you so much. And what I can do is like, if you want to make more money, I'll show you a few things that you can do that have to do with equity and inclusion that'll get you there, like hire
Mhm.
more women. Um, but I'm not going to spend my time like talking to you about your isms.
Yeah,
Um, what I do want to do is work on those people in the middle
yeah.
who know that they have something and that they have bad habits, but they maybe just don't quite know what they are. But
Mhm.
they are motivated to do something differently because they see atrocities everywhere they look and they just can't take it
Right,
anymore.
right.
And then you have the people who are super duper loud,
Mhm.
who are always the people speaking up for everyone else,
Right.
um, always putting their necks on the line, and like are just the loud people that tend to be muted after a while.
Mhm.
I love working with those people because they have so much energy, so much grit. They
Yes.
just need different communications
Right, right.
to get their point across in a way that's going to be heard.
I worked with a company recently on bias and microaggressions, and that's something that we teach the members of NAWSP is how to identify them, because a lot of people don't realize that they're being aggressed to. And
Yes, we're targeted. Yeah.
right. So we teach them here's how to identify microaggressions, micro insults, all those good things. And here's how to reply to them. And here's how to address someone who is also being targeted with those microaggressions. So, would you say that there's an opportunity to teach those underrepresented populations what exactly microaggressions, micro insults, aggressive behavior is so that they can, number one, identify it, they can combat it in a very respectful way, and also teach others, hey, you know what? Did you know that that was a microaggression against you? and we can stop the cycle, the perpetuation of all of this, because it is rampant. I still
Yeah.
receive it. And I am, well, I'm not in corporate America anymore, but I still get it.
Yeah. They're called microaggressions because they are micro.
Yes.
And the aggressor typically doesn't realize that they're offending someone.
Right.
So if you don't recognize that someone is, saying something to you that is rooted in discrimination or rooted in prejudice, then yeah, how do you defend yourself? And I think the history of our country, specifically the American values and Northern European values, there is this history of colonization.
Yeah.
There's a history of assimilation, and there's this history of integration in a way that is more assimilation than actually integrating what people are saying. And that is, when you are within that, it is sometimes really hard to recognize that you are conditioned to assimilate.
Yes.
When I think back on my entire 20s, I think like what really keeps me up at night and makes me feel a lot of pain is like thinking of all those times when I'm like, oh my gosh, that was super racist what that person did.
Yeah.
15 years ago. And then you just get really, really angry. And so I guess this is all to wrap it up to say, there isn't really an answer. It's really about becoming more aware and thinking like, did I say that to you because you're a white male? Or did I say that to you like that? Or did I interrupt you because you're a woman? It's just that habit of questioning yourself. And then not being afraid to talk about it with your friends and say like, would you find that offensive?
Right. Right. There has to come a time when we become aware, self-aware of what we are saying to others. And I think there's a huge opportunity for us to take a self-reflection and say, am I part of the problem?
And you can just answer yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And the thing that I find the most fascinating in this work is when I work with people of color who, when we're in session, it's like they have nothing to learn. And I have felt that way many times, many times. Not only is it I have nothing to learn, but I don't really want to participate because I don't want to have to like help everyone out with this stuff, which I completely understand. And I often, would not want certain people to have to be there.
Right.
At the same time, I have encountered times when I hear hypocrisy from a person of color as a result of their conditioning in the system that we're in, to no fault of their own. And I think, you and I have as much work to do as pale, male, and stale number A or number two,
Right.
because we are all a part. We are all within this system. It is just a matter of recognizing where we have negative impact and changing our behaviors within that.
Right. Right. I can't tell you how many times I have been asked to those Googleable questions about race and diversity. And there's a lot of pressure on Black men and Black women to be the voice of everyone. How do your people feel about this? And I have people reaching out to me saying, you know what, Cynthia, that's a lot of pressure and I don't want any part of it. I don't want to be the voice of Black America. And they do that all the time.
I have gotten in the habit. My husband is white. He's from Ireland. So he's not American, but he is white. And I often ask him, like, what would white men think about this? He's like, I don't know. and I think just seeing and doing that more often with other people, like, what do white people think about this? And putting it back on, like, do you understand, do you get like how that feels to have to speak for everyone of your identification? And I find that helps people kind of grasp how tough that is. And it's because, they only have so many people of color they know.
Yes, that is true. So let's talk about there are certain people in certain demographics that have privilege that others don't have.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are a person that has said privilege, what can you do with your privilege to move the needle?
It goes back to what I was saying before, is taking an inventory of where you hold privilege and where you don't.
Okay.
Where you, in the places where you feel like you don't hold privilege,
Mm-hmm.
who is someone who you're friends with, who's an ally, who can then be an accomplice with you.
Okay.
So let's say I'm in a talent review meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and I know there's going to be some people who are going to come up who I'm going to want to say something about, but because I'm also Black and I'm also a woman, the way when it's coming from me, it won't sound as legit. But if I have my friend Sally say the same thing,
Or
it
Tom.
will definitely be, what's that? Or Tom. If I have Sally or Tom say the same thing, it's definitely going to be heard. And so, first of all, taking the pride away that you're all you all have the same goal, which is to advocate for people who are in the margins.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily about you. So it's teaming up is one way to do it. And then, like I was saying before, like raising your own awareness of how you have an impact or where you can have an impact.
Mm-hmm.
And also like really being okay with the places that you can't. For me, I've done a couple marches, but they just make me really uncomfortable for reasons that have nothing to do with the subject matter. But I'm pretty good at facilitating for a small group of 10.
Okay.
So it's understanding what it is and really focusing in on doing and being good at that, because that's how you can have an impact.
Yes. Yes. I like what the Obama administration did when he was in office. And politics aside, one of the things that they noticed was that women would say something in an executive level meeting, and no one would say anything except a man would say exactly what she said, and they would say, "Good point, Trevor." So what they
Right.
decided to do was that buddy system that you talked about, and you team up with someone that edifies what you just said and says, "Hey, Mandy, that was a great point. I think we need to unpack that."
Yes.
Yes. So
I've definitely been in rooms like that.
yes. So don't wait for someone to be your buddy. Actively go out and get someone that will amplify your message in those important meetings, and you amplify theirs too.
Mm-hmm.
We all have a role and we all have something that we can do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've definitely worked with people for whom it's, and it's not necessarily about like forming super deeply personal connections. It
Mm-hmm.
is, we are playing survivor. So it's about finding allies and finding a common interest. And if for one person, like maybe they don't have the same, view on what racism really is,
Mm-hmm.
but they want to hire more women, then work towards that common goal together. You're going to get something out of it because that person's going to speak up on your behalf and give you credit, because they know that when they do, they're going to be able to get what they want.
Yes.
And so I think that's how, I guess my sales background has really been influential in how I do this work, because it's all about how you influence people to do things differently.
Yes. Yes. And sales is nothing more than influencing decision makers to say yes, both your internal customers and your external customers. So how can you call yourself a bona fide salesperson if you can't even influence your teammates to take pervasive action?
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what challenges do you see in the DE&I space in 2020 that need to be gone away with on December 31st?
I don't know how much time do we have. I know you're serious in there. Oh gosh, I think the thing that's been hurting me the most this year, and especially now that I am in my own business, and I really do rely on my network of DEI practitioners.
Mm-hmm.
Just as other practice, there's ego. And not everyone has the same views on the way things should be done,
Right.
even though we all are working towards the same thing. And we disagree. And I think that's often what's hard, is being in those meetings with people who are also so passionate about this stuff, and also so motivated to make change, but we disagree, and it slows us down. But I also think that in itself is the example of what diversity means, because you are working through that stuff. You are getting everyone's perspective, and you're taking the time to really understand each other when you disagree, so that you can come up with something more brilliant. What I also think this year that must stop is there's not one fix, and there's not an answer. It is a journey. And I have many different ways of saying that, but mostly I just keep repeating it. I think of it as like, a hair journey. Your hair journey never ends.
Never.
Or your diet journey never ends.
Ever.
I mean, not that that's either of those are at all the same as equity, but understand that it's a never ending process, and that it has to be as important as everything else in your life, or it's just not going to get the same attention.
Yes. I want to take a quick moment to shout out some people who have joined us today. Lionel King out in out in San Francisco. He's in your neck of the woods. Dr. Joe Johnson. I follow him on Instagram. And if you ever need an uplifting, motivational shot in the arm, he is the one to do it. Kenneth Miles, hello, Fred. How you doing? Jennifer Evans, thank you. Carmen Spencer, you have been extremely active in this feed and giving us lots of tidbits and nuggets. Thank you so much for that. Mr. Ramirez, thank you. Jim Stowe, hey, how you doing? Jared, long time no see. I used to work with Jared back in Cincinnati at TQL. And then last but not least is Joy D. Calloway, and she speaks on one crisis from crazy. So she helps women. I'm serious.
That is so great.
Women who are one crisis from crazy, get it all back together. And she is amazing. So thank you to everyone. Oh, Jill Barrientos, thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions for either me or Mandy, please put them in the comments. We have about 28 minutes to go, and I want to make sure that everyone gets their questions answered. Carmen put up a comment, and I'm going to put it up for everyone. She said, I think the problem is sometimes we are included, being women, to check off a box on the list, but not included in creating the checklist for learning opportunities. And I can't tell you how many times people have come to us saying, we want to recruit women in sales. And I say, tell me about your women in sales initiative. Crickets.
Yeah.
And the reason being that women in sales know that they are being heavily sought after. So if your company does not have a robust program to attract, hire, develop, and retain, then you will lose them. As soon as
not only that, Cynthia, but I have a lot of conversations with women in whatever position they're in, and I hear it's not fair. I'm like, girl, please, we don't have time for it's not fair, because it ain't going to be fair ever.
Bus fare, train fare, that's the only fare, hair fare, that's the only fare you need to worry about.
Yeah, and so it's hard because just because people want to hire us doesn't mean they're going to do anything past that.
No.
Once you get in the door, you're kind of on your own. And you can either kind of sit in they hired me because I'm a woman, or they're watching everything I do because I'm a woman and I'm their diversity hire, or you can get your butt out there and start networking with all the women in the company, figuring out like what's going on, like get the down low, and start to create a network for yourself within the company to not only expand your brand, but also so you know what's going on. You're not going to miss stuff, because what happens is, yes, you have to get into those meetings, but you can't just go like what I used to do and just go literally open the doors and be like, what's going on in here?
Right. You have to be invited. But how do you get
now that everything's on Zoom, like you straight up going to miss those meetings.
Yes.
So one thing I used to do was if the person had their calendar public, I would put it online. And I want to get to know this person because they know stuff that I think I don't.
Right.
And I'm going to kind of figure out where I can get into their schedule and ask them about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's knowing that, yes, you are put at a disadvantage, but at the same time, I feel that I am so much more savvy at navigating than certain people because I'm behind already.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that a lot of people, women particularly, need to realize that they were hired for their sales skills as well as their political skill.
Right.
How do you navigate the political climate of your organization? Because every organization has one. Don't sit back and say, well, nobody tapped me for this committee or to lead this this committee or this team. You've got to be visible. You've got to speak up and say, this is what I want to do. Because as they say in the South, a closed mouth doesn't get fed.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What books are you reading on? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Books.
What books are you reading on diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Okay, so now's probably the time where I should let you know that although I'm a parent of two and I have a full-time job, I don't sleep because I read too many books. So I am often, and it's usually like the novels that I stay up late with that are written by Black women.
Okay.
But I always have, if I don't really listen to the radio unless it's NPR. Anytime I'm not working out, I guess, I'm listening to a book.
Okay.
And it's usually about this work.
Okay.
Because I know that I still have a lot to learn. And when it comes to anything to do with talking about race, when it comes to talking about inclusion in the workplace, like I want to soak up all that information. And so I listen to books at double speed.
Okay.
Sometimes 3x so I can just like start crushing through books.
Yes.
Because it is so important to me to just consume as much knowledge as possible. So to answer your question,
What's in your Audible feed? Oh
my gosh.
Yeah, tell me.
What I'm reading right now listening to is Undocumented Americans. I need to get the author's name. She's amazing. She talks about just the experiences of undocumented Americans and what their experiences are like, typically brown folks from south of the border.
Okay.
And for me, being a Black person, I can often focus on like the Black struggle, which I think encompasses everything, but there's also perspectives that I don't spend as much time with. How to Be an Anti-Racist.
Okay.
By Ibram Kendi. And then if you haven't read books by Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me is like an absolute must do. It's a really great listen. I love Ta-Nehisi's New York accent, and he's just such a great storyteller, and it's a letter to his son.
Oh, wow.
And then I would, because everyone's talking about white fragility, I would read Robin DiAngelo's book, or at least listen to it, or see one of her sessions. I worked with her personally a couple times, and I often get the question of like, so do you think Robin's doing the right thing? Is she like being extra? Is she speaking out for us when she shouldn't be? And it's both and neither, but, excuse me, the academic term was really put on the map because of her book. So I think it's really important to understand the terminology that she uses, which kind of gives you background as to why she does what she does.
Okay. Good. Absolutely. That is wonderful.
I like Black Fatigue. Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, Mary McFarland. How are you? How are you, Mary? Okay.
But you know what, Cynthia? Like I often, because I talk about this stuff all day, if I'm reading too many books about racism during a week, I get fatigued.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important for me to have balance, which is why I read a lot of novels written by Black women, like romance novels, you know.
Something to unplug.
Indeed.
Right? Something to unplug. Because being, actually, let me ask you this. What is one thing, or maybe there are several things, what is one thing that our colleagues that are not of Black and female demographic, what is it that people get wrong about us?
Now, Cynthia, you know I can't speak of everybody.
No, I would like your opinion though.
Um, what is something people get wrong? Oh, where to start? It's often I often find that I'm so distracted by my process and the way I navigate that I sometimes don't pick up on stuff. Um, what I've noticed in my clients is when I go to talk to the CEO, they've done zero research on me, zero. And what that tells me is that either that tells me that they knew that this is something they need to do, but they probably asked their head of HR to go out and find someone. And I probably have a really great relationship with that person in HR who got sign off, but the CEO just like doesn't really know anything about or care to know anything about me, and how I have a background in tech and how I come from sales and how I've built teams. And so I think oftentimes we are, obviously put in a box. Like, here's this cute brown lady coming to talk to us about racism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what people definitely don't get wrong is that we don't know everything.
Exactly.
I can speak from my experience and my perspective, but I have not written books. I don't have a PhD on being Black. And so I only come with one perspective. Therefore, I focus on what I'm good at, which is the building of the systems and the strategy. I can't talk to you about your whiteness all day. It's not my style.
Yeah.
So it's understanding that we are not what is it? Enigmatic. Is that the word?
I think so.
Yes. We are not one thing.
Yeah.
We are many
And not
things.
every Black woman has the same lens through which she views life. Right?
Won't she say it? Won't she say it?
I grew up in a population 2,500. I was the only Black family in Greentown, Indiana, which was a sundown town. And I'm sure that your experiences are totally different than mine. But to say that Mandy and Cynthia think the same because they're both Black women, that's like saying Olivia Pope and Cookie off of Empire would experience the same type or like the same things.
But you know what? They get some shit done, Cynthia.
They do, but in totally different psychographics, right?
Absolutely.
Even though
different taste in men,
right?
So many differences.
Exactly. So diversity is more than just gender and race and sexual orientation. Diversity of thought counts more, I think.
Yeah. I want to call out We Can't Talk About That at Work is so great. I love that book. And the reason I like it so much is because a lot of times when I start working with clients, they're like, I don't want to bring politics into the workplace. And that is code for, I'm not comfortable talking about race. And this isn't about politics. This is about humanity, which is not politics.
Right. Yeah. We can't talk about that at work. Woo. I would love to see courageous.
Yes, Joy, you do have a PhD in your Blackness. That is right. Sorry, Cynthia,
isn't she on fire? Joy is amazing, amazing, and she'll tell it to you straight.
Yes,
you straight. So there are things that we can't talk about in closed rooms, and that's why we're talking about them here. Those dark corners of parties when we don't really want to say what we want to say. And I'm hoping that conversations like this one will give people either talking points to take back to their ERGs, their bosses, somewhere that the conversation can get started. Because diversity, equity, and inclusion is everyone's responsibility. And I see a lot of diversity work, but I don't see a lot of inclusion because women still have to assimilate once they get there.
You tell them. And that is so important for people to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. If I can't wear my natural hair or if I can't say what I'm going to say at your workplace, that's like inviting me to the table, but not offering me anything to eat.
Right. And nobody likes that.
No.
I'm a hungry girl.
What would you say to leaders who are thinking about hiring a diversity, equity, inclusion strategist? What are some things that they need to look for?
Oh, gosh. A strategist, I think it's someone who, I guess, has a network of people who can start to execute on that strategy.
Okay.
It's one thing, and proof, not proof, but someone who has like a high level mindset, but can really design down to the nitty gritty.
Okay.
And so what people like me like to do is get all of the information, all of the tea, and kind of synthesize it back in a way that's going to be understood to that organization, and gives them like actionable things that they can do that maybe they don't understand the connection between all of the tea and the strategy, but at least they feel like they can do something that makes sense to them.
Yes.
And what strategists are not is that we are not amazing facilitators. I mean, some of us are, and some of us can do the job, but our specialty is really helping you get started in that plan. And we don't do implicit bias training. I don't do implicit bias training.
Okay. So I've worked with companies that the CEO will say, this is what I want done, and this is when I want it done.
Bless.
Yes. The middle managers, on the other hand, if they're not on board, nothing gets done. Have you experienced that?
It's a hot mess. It's what do you work on first? Because it's still going to be trash at the management level.
Yeah.
And individual contributors are still going to get really mad and leave. But it's really focusing on one or the other, because you can't do both. And figuring out which one of those you can have a bigger impact on first is really, really important. So if you get if you're at a company and the CEO is just like, not going to happen, then focus your energy on your employee resource groups.
Yes.
And middle management. Because you're absolutely right. At some companies, all of that stuff, all of that trash will filter down to first level managers, and they're going to treat their people badly. But sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. Sometimes frontline managers don't agree with the CEO and will manage differently. Right. So it's understanding what you got.
So it would seem to me that middle managers have probably the hardest job. They're sandwiched between the C-level, which is pushing down all of this stuff, and they've got individual contributors pushing up. So it's not an easy job. So how is it that you, as a strategist, can break things down to manageable bite-sized pieces and influence those middle managers to want to do the work? Because they're busy.
Yeah, it's working on both ends. It's helping managers see what's in it for them. And it can be anything from, I want my team to perform, to I don't want to be accused of sexual harassment, to this is really important to me. Yeah. And so you want to kind of get at them from both ends and directly. And so 3 things. One, it is empowering and giving more and more agency to those who report to them so that they can speak up and not put their necks on line. Okay. It is giving better context and language to the leadership and really like deep-rooted practices of reflection so that they're not stepping in poop all the time. And then when it comes to the actual middle managers, what I really like to do is find my one champion in every team and really work with that champion to influence the rest of their team, because it's not going to being a frontline manager is so, you have so much responsibility and so much pressure, and you only have so much information.
Right. And this is,
and you're often misinformed.
Yes. And if I'm a middle manager, this is one less thing that I want to do. So how do we make it so that they want to? I can come to a middle manager and I can say, do you know that by having at least 50% women on your team, you will increase your revenue by 15% year over year? That gets their attention.
But sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. They're like, man, I don't believe you.
Right. Well, try me and prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Let's have that conversation. But with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, where's the ROI? Other than it's the right thing to do, but a lot of people don't care about the right thing to do.
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked. It is figuring out what is in it for you. And I think that is what is so important, is that if you don't have, I don't care necessarily what the reason is, you have to have a reason as to why you called someone like me. And I need to know what that reason is so that I can help you do that. And oftentimes what you think you want is not what you're going to get. I mean, you'll get it, but it's not going to look like what you thought it would look like.
Right.
And a lot of times CEOs will be like, I want a plan. I want to be able to tell people what we're doing. I'm like, well, tell people what we're doing, but it probably isn't going to look like what your product leader is going to do, or what the type of OKRs or KPIs he's going to have.
Sure.
And so it's really showing that you're listening, but also being really strong and confident in that you know more than this person does.
Yes.
About this stuff.
I get it. Yeah.
I don't know if that answered the question.
If I had a room full of CEOs who were thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, because I can't imagine they wouldn't be, what would you tell them? What nugget would you tell them that could change everything?
The first thing I would say is this ain't about you.
Okay. And I can see you saying, you know what, Bob, this ain't about you. Okay.
Or there's probably 50% Bob's and Jim's. I mean, as soon as you said, I just imagine a room of all CEOs, 2 of which are probably women. Maybe I'll have 1 person who's of color. And there's so much ego in that room that everyone wants to be the best about diversity. And it's like, it ain't about you. The only time that is about you is your reflection and how you feel about yourself, and separating those two. And the last thing is, and what I work so hard on my leaders with, is you have to not only go through the process of feeling the pain and the discomfort and the shame, or whatever you don't want to call it, around these types of equity conversations. And you have to separate that from whether or not you're a good person. Because if you are too caught up in whether or not you are racist, you are not going to hear anything, because you're going to be totally defensive. Right. Whereas if you're thinking, okay, I'm a good person and I'm acknowledging that this is bad, I'm going to process the pain, because it is painful when you realize all the stuff that that you have done over the last, however many years, that have perpetuated white supremacy, perpetuated the racism that we have in our society. It hurts. It hurts. But you have to separate that. And as soon as you do, that opens up a whole can where you can actually engage and learn.
Right. And listen to your people, because they have ideas, they have thoughts. They're on the ground level doing the day-to-day. Ask them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Ask them.
Don't ask them what it's like to be a Black person.
Oh, God. And don't ask them anything you can Google.
Yes. Right? Google it first.
Yeah. Just, the dialogue, the engagement, the community, that's what's missing. I see a lot of CEOs pushing down, this is what I want, this is what I want, but they're not listening, just like you said. And the fish stinks from the head every single time. So if your organization is not where you want it to be, yeah, it's not about you.
As Lauryn Hill says, how are you going to win if you ain't right within?
Only because it's 8:00 at night, almost 9:00 at night. Maybe we're just punch silly. I don't know, punch drunk or whatever.
But I'm serious. Like, that's what I tell people. Like, when I'm talking to a leader of a function or a company, it's like, we ain't going to talk about anything that other people are supposed to be doing. We're not going to talk about the distribution of any responsibilities. We're just going to talk about you and your orientation around how you feel and how you lead, because it's at the end of the day, it comes down to communication and communication.
Yes.
And that is not only how you speak and use language, but it's how you hear.
Yes. And can we agree that the majority of CEOs have a lens through which they view things that's based upon one gender, one race, and their upbringing? And good, bad, or indifferent. It's hard for them to see diversity if they grew up in a non-diverse world. And so now you're asking them, well, let's talk about diversity. Of course they're confused. Of course they have no clue, because this is something totally foreign to them. And here you are, Mandy, walking in the door saying, well, let's talk about diversity. And they say, don't want to, but I have to. Yeah.
Yeah. And the first thing I do is pretend we're in Goodwill Hunting and just say, it's not your fault. Not your fault.
It's not your fault.
I mean, it is your fault. It's your responsibility and it's your fault. But like, you didn't know what you didn't know.
Right. Unconsciously incompetent. But now you're going to be consciously incompetent. Now you're going to know what you don't know. Shame on you if you don't do anything.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like Maya Angelou says, when we know better, we do better. Or at least we should. So last question for you. Does DE&I belong in HR?
No.
I knew you were going to say that. Where does it belong?
It belongs right next to the CEO.
Yes, I agree. Tell us why, because I have my thoughts. I want to hear yours.
Well, HR, as much as I love and that part of the business is so important, no matter how you try to spin it, it's always going to be seen as a cost center.
Okay.
So anything that HR tries to push, any initiatives are always going to be, I don't know if we have the budget for that.
Yeah.
Or I don't know how important that is versus this other thing we have to do for compliance. Whereas if it's sitting in the office of the CEO, it trickles down into every single part of the business, especially in operations. And if you don't have the ear, as you said, the fish stinks from the head. If you don't have a regular cadence with the ear of the person who is the spokesperson for the company, then you're not going to be able to really have an impact. And if all you do as a chief diversity officer is sit next to the CEO and be like, no, you shouldn't say that. Or yeah, you should say this. Like, that's cool. That's one thing you can do. And that is important. And if you do find yourself in HR, there is so much that you can do. And it is such an important part of diversity and inclusion. I simply think it is imperative that it is right next to the top leadership.
Yes. Yes. So we've got about 4 minutes. If there are any questions, put those into the chat and we will get to those. Mandy, how can people get a hold of you?
You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, at Mandy Bynum, and my website, mandybynum.com, which is under construction, but it should give you all the stuff that you need.
Okay.
And yeah, those are the two best places, or just give me a holler.
Fabulous. Fabulous. And are you accepting new clients?
I am at the moment.
I was about to say,
I mean, even if I wasn't, I'd probably say anyway.
You can always outsource.
See? Yes.
Yes. Yes. I am so grateful for your time, sharing your knowledge, pouring into us. Thank you so much for being the very first guest for celebrating us with Cynthia Barnes. And if there are any questions, feel free to reach out to Mandy. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to answer any questions. And join us next Tuesday, where I will have another guest and another candid conversation about celebrating us. Thank you, everyone.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. You have been a joy, and I'm so grateful. Much love.
Likewise.
Much love. Yes. Good night, everyone.
See you soon.